welcome back to PSA TV. This is the Wake Up Call with me, Christy Kali Singh. Some very interesting developments taking place recently. We've got the opposition leader, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Visesa, extending an olive branch to the trade union movement in an attempt to help her win the upcoming general elections. Joining me on the line this morning, I've got the president of the Federation and Independent Trade Unions and Non-Governmental Organization, Mr. Joseph Remy. Good morning to you, Mr. Remy.
Hi, good morning to you, Christy, and good morning to your viewers and listeners.
How are you this morning?
I'm fine, under the circumstances, doing pretty well. And let me just say, before we get into it, I am deeply concerned about what the latest development with your president, and I would want to, get further details before FITUN make a statement for the leader of the Trade Union Federation. And
yes.
It's something that bothers us deeply.
Yes, and I'm sure, we shall be releasing a statement as soon as details come to hand from our end here.
Yeah, so I would just want to extend our solidarity at this time, because once you see these things happen in the trade union leaders, then, it's when your neighbor house on fire with your own, and I think all trade union leaders should be mindful of what is happening and be very concerned about this development at this time.
Yes, I know there were a lot of, buzz on social media about it. It's not something that I want to go into too much, because we don't really know quite the facts yet.
Yes. That's right.
So, of course, I know Mr. Duke will, of course...
Definitely, I know that.
He would be very considerate and let the public know exactly what has happened and our way forward.
Okay, no problem. Yeah.
Mr. Remy, the invitation by the opposition leader to join arms with her, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we had publicly stated that it's really a disingenuous invitation. We felt that the fact that the Federation, in collaboration with the Movement for Social Justice, would have been supportive of the People's Partnership government in 2010. Mm-hmm. And that is what was responsible. And we would hold that view strongly for catapulting them into office. They went on the strength of the united, force, the working class in Trinidad and Tobago, extending their support behind them. And at the end of the day, when they got into office, we saw they moved from the People's Partnership back to the United National Congress. Yes. And that caused the whole partnership to collapse. The labor movement took exit, MSG took its exit. And as such, we feel that invitation this time around is not going to work, because we have seen and we have felt the betrayal, and we would not want to find ourselves back in a similar situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Rightly so. The trade union movement itself has taken a lot of blows from government, from the opposition, probably from the people, the public itself. What has kept the trade union strong, in your opinion? And, it has just been like water off its backs.
Well, it's a historical thing, Christy, most of the leaders in politics now would have heard the backs of the trade union movement. And if we go back to the history of the trade union movement involvement in politics, we will see that it started with Butler, and Butler would have been deceived and would have been betrayed by the colonial masters and those in local politics at that time. And it continues up to now. They believe that they would want to use the working class to gain ascendancy. And once they do that, then they shift gear and have control and keep the workers in a particular state. Mm-hmm. And we have understood that the challenge we have and the challenge we have had over the years is that leaders in the movement have not recognized the fact that they have to define their own political space and agenda and craft that space properly by doing proper mobilization and getting down to the shop floor level and educating the working class about politics and how they are being used and misused and abused, and then building that force. But sometimes we try to see the thing happen too fast without doing the requisite mobilization. And when you don't do that, it falls apart, and then the politicians realize that it's a weak bunch and they go back using us again. And I think we need to stand up and be strong this time around and build a strong united force, so that even if there is not a political party, when the working class and when the trade union movement say we are not supporting this government, they must feel the impact immediately. And that is where we would want to position ourselves at this time.
Yeah, very, very true. Recently, we would have seen many retrenchments and the hinting of retrenchments in any fancy term put, but at the end of the day, we all know it's heading towards one particular direction, which is retrenchments. It's something that you've been very vocal about, but it's something that, again, it has been very common of late. What are your thoughts on that?
And again, it's a worrying sign, when we hear on one hand that there is a turnaround in the economy and we are seeing economic growth. But while we are seeing that on one hand, workers are losing their jobs, and it's not that it's because of a re-engineering of the work processes and there is a retraining and retooling of workers. It's a straight case of the bottom line for these institutions to keep their return on investment at a particular level. Mm-hmm. And it's something that we have to continue to push back against, because what this is doing, it is destroying the social fabric of the society. You have families that are being disrupted. You have youths that are being educated, mm-hmm. coming out of the universities, the tertiary education institution, very well certified, I would want to say at this time, and can't get an entry point into the work environment in the labor market. And it leads to frustration. And then we have a case where some of them are lured into the wrong areas, and it creates a problem for our society. And there has to be some kind of national policy position relative to wage-led growth. We have been saying that all along. And we have to find a space to create opportunities locally for the mass amount of young persons coming out of our tertiary educational institutions and entering into the labor market, but don't have opportunities to make a contribution to national development. And that is a frightening specter, and it's something I would continue to be vocal about, because retrenchment is a dangerous thing for our society. And I don't believe all the rationales that have been put forward on the table are properly justified for the amount of retrenchment that I'm seeing taking place. There are other alternatives that could be pursued.
You mentioned there are some other alternatives. Do you mind probably sharing with us probably some of these alternatives that these businesses can possibly look into?
That's right. One of the things that we spoke about even at FITUN, and when the Joint Trade Union Movement and FITUN had done their LEAP, which was Labour Economic Alternative Plan. Mm-hmm. One of the things we spoke about is the return of the apprenticeship system, so that you could take those young persons coming out of the tertiary education institution, the secondary school system, and prepare them for the tech work areas through apprenticeship schemes, and put a mandate on some of those institutions, some of those private and public institutions, that there must be a cadre of apprentices that they must take on. Mm-hmm. And there must be some kind of organized area with respect to how they are compensated, recognized, and rewarded. That is one area. And then we talk about the whole issue of using cooperatives as a means of enhancing employment opportunities. We felt that the URP and the CPEP programs could be transformed into community cooperatives with a niche into the agricultural sector, where there could be gainful employment and ownership of these cooperatives by young persons. And as such, you would not find people being helpless and hopeless when they are placed on the breadline, because there will be opportunities from these community-oriented cooperatives that would create the kind of employment that we believe is necessary now. And we feel that some of our proposals would have been rejected by the government because they felt it was not their kind of economic policy. Mm-hmm. And it never had any traction. And look at the situation we have found ourselves in now.
Yeah. And even when you look at the Industrial Relations Act and the Benefits and Severance Act, no progress has been really made in terms of, there's always been this talk about consultations. Can you tell us if you have any hope that there will probably be, any sort of progress going forward in terms of these legislations?
To be honest, I can't say I have 100% hope. I sit on the National Tripartite Advisory Council as one of the Labour representatives. And the Industrial Relations Act was placed before NTAC, and then the fact that we never had 100% consensus at NTAC because the business class has certain positions that we are diametrically opposed to, particularly with respect to the certification of trade unions. They want to ensure that that happens. The issue of worker under the meaning of the Act. There are a lot of provisions that they would like to see that we are totally opposed to. So we don't have a consensus at NTAC relative to the amendment to the IRA. So what will happen is that whatever the government feel that is necessary, they will push it through, get cabinet approval, and go forward. The challenge we have is we are into the fourth year of this administration, and there has not been cabinet approval for amendments to the IRA. So there could never be any hope in this 5-year administration that there will be any amendment to the Industrial Relations Act, neither the Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act, because with respect to the Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act, the issue of what happened at Mittal relative to the fact that the company would have declared bankruptcy, insolvency, and the workers up to now have not been properly compensated. We raised those things and we wanted the amendment to the Act to reflect those things, one, and the amendment to the Companies Act, so that at least there should be some guarantee when those companies close down. And we have not had a consensus on those things as yet. So again, I don't see any possibility of that happening before this term of government comes to an end, and that is the challenge we have been having with successive. There's push of the business sector. Let me just say one case in point with the IRA that we are very concerned about. Imagine the government is part of the International Labour Organization. They ratify the issue of domestic workers being considered workers under the meaning of the Act. And the business sector is totally opposed to that, and they are fighting that down. And that to me is something that is so oppressive, it's frightening. And those are the kind of challenges that we have been faced with because of pressure being exerted by the business sector. And most governments succumb to them.
Oh, Mr. Remy?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay. Now, I see here that you've said in an article that the two major political parties did not deliver on key legislation which addresses issues affecting the labor movement. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that for me, please?
Okay, well, we spoke about the IRA, which we felt still needs to be addressed with some level of urgency. The Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act, it is still there. We still do have the amendments to it. We still believe that there's supposed to be a lot of work to be done with the Occupational Safety and Health Act relative to the fact that under the Act, trade unions are not recognized as part of the process for raising issues. And it is individual workers. Those are some of the amendments we would like to see to that Act. Workmen compensation, you know the challenge workers have when they get damaged on the job.
Yeah.
It's an archaic system in terms of that. And we believe that there should be a revamping of that particular piece of legislation because it really places workers at risk. So we have not seen any progress made with any piece of those legislation relative to any tangible amendments. And we are still at the same place you would have been at way back in 2009 when we thought that the partnership would have made some headway. They came on board in 2010. They engaged the labor movement. We developed the workers' agenda. We talk about those issues in the workers' agenda, amendment to those pieces of legislation. We talk about coming up with a migrant labor policy so that we would not have found ourselves in the situation we have found ourselves in now with the Venezuelan situation. None of those things have been addressed by the partnership, and 4 years into the PNM government, still at the same place. So that is why I said that none of the mainstream political parties have seen it fit to deal with amending labor legislation because they don't believe in any tangible amendment because they would want to ensure that the business sector continues to reap the benefit because that's where the political patronage comes from when it's time for elections.
Sadly. Mr. Remy, recently we would have seen the Prime Minister making some very contradictory statements, to put it lightly, of course, with regards to public servants, in terms of calling public servants, saying that public servants don't do anything, but at the end of the day, they just look forward to a pay and they make the most noise and they do absolutely nothing. What are your thoughts on his statements?
Well, we did a release. I've not seen it much publicized with it, but FITUN did a release, and we said to the Prime Minister, no, that is not the way that he would want to bring reform to the public service. And we said that what the country needs right now is sober and inspirational leadership. And we felt that the Prime Minister's statement was very unfortunate. The timing was poor, the content was poor, the context was poor, and I think that the tone suggested that he was scolding the public servants publicly. And we don't believe that they are totally responsible for what the situation they have found themselves in.
Yeah.
I have seen the conditions under which some public servants
it's
have to
horrible.
work. The resources that have been made available to them are very minuscule. They don't have much to work with. They put them in these nice fancy buildings, but they don't have anything much to carry on and get the job done. Then the whole issue of the myriad of regulations and things that govern the operations of the public service. The whole issue of proper public service reform that is done collaboratively with the recognized majority union. Those are the things that we believe are necessary. The management structure in the public service has to be looked at, and the whole issue of how they practice human resource management as against industrial relations, good and proper industrial relations practices. And I believe that if there's a systemic issue in the public service, and we have to be honest, we have been saying that we would always push for workers to increase the level of productivity, because when we go to the bargaining table, we would want to have something to bargain with.
Yeah.
And we always had workers to
Mr. Remy,
are very archaic. How can you be productive?
just before we wrap things up, what is your Independence Day wish for this country as we slowly approach Independence Day later on this month?
I would continue to push for an awakening of the minds and souls of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, for them to really think whether we are truly independent and whether that the independence has done anything tangible for the standard of living that we enjoy right now. I would hope that people will come to that awakening soon, and they will come to the realization that they have to take charge of the destiny of this country, and they can't place it in the hands of a few political neophytes, as sometimes I would want to say. And we need to really start to rally around the Trinidad and Tobago, the real white and black. Let us forget the yellow, let us forget the red. It's about Trinidad and Tobago, and we need to put aside political partisanship and talk about how could we fix and rebuild this beautiful Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I would hope that by next month, when it comes to Republic, you will start to hear a different narrative being exposed in the public space by the citizens, pointing out to the fact that they are ready to take charge of their own destiny.
Well, one can certainly hope that, this brings some new hope and some new light into the way in which people think.
I would really hope so. That's basically what I would really am yearning for all along.
All right, Mr. Remy, thank you so much for your valuable contribution on our show this morning. As always, we enjoy your contribution, your valuable knowledge, and we thank you so much for coming on this morning.
No problem. It's a pleasure once again. All
Have
the best.
a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Bye.
All right, just a brief conversation there with the president of the Federation of Independent and Trade Unions and Non-Governmental Organizations, Mr. Joseph Remy, about a way forward in terms of the labor movement. He has, of course, expressed deep concern with regards to the legislations, government come, government go, and yet the same thing remains. So, one wish remains, however, a glimmer of hope on the horizon for workers. That has been something that Mr. Remy has always advocated for in the past, and it's not something uncommon. If you ever listen to any trade unionist or any member of society, you'd hear that there is one common thing. It's a hope for a brighter tomorrow. This is PSA TV. We'll be right back. A very good afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago.
Welcome to PSA